Welcome to the Global Wellness HQ family of podcasts. We are your international headquarters for resources and ideas and insight in relation to the 9 elements of holistic wellness. Join us as we interview local and international wellness experts and learn how you can implement and improve one element or dimension of wellness at a time. Our experts will share their practical tips on wellness in one of these core areas: emotional, intellectual, occupational, physical, environmental, financial, spiritual, social, or habitual. We created our family of podcasts as a resource for anyone who is looking to integrate the 9 elements of holistic wellness into their daily lives. Welcome to the show. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the show. I'm excited. My new friend Terry Tucker and I are having a chat. And today we're going to talk about a whole bunch of random things, but we're going to have fun. Terry, why don't you tell me a little bit about what you do and who you are?
Well, Jeff, first of all, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you today. Yeah, I grew up on the south side of Chicago here in the United States. I'm the oldest of 3 boys. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall and actually went to college on a basketball scholarship. When I graduated from college, I moved home to find a job. I'm really going to date myself now, but this was long before the internet was available to help people find employment. The good news was that I found that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. The bad news was I spent the next 3.5 years living with my parents, helping my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. Professionally, as I said, started out at Wendy's, and then I switched to hospital administration. I actually went to work for the hospital that cared for my father and my grandmother. After that, I made a major pivot in my life, became a police officer. One of the jobs I had in my law enforcement career was I was a SWAT hostage negotiator. After that, started a school security consulting business, coached girls high school basketball. For the last 11 and a half years now, I've been battling a rare form of cancer. And then I guess to round it out, my wife and I have been married for 30 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military here in the United States, the Space Force.
Ooh, okay, now I'm going to be really cool because I'm going to tell my kids I met the father of somebody in Space Force.
There you go.
Well, I love that background. Now, you and I can talk about many things, and I'm sure we'll cover a lot. Um, Something tells me, and what I'm getting the sense from you is that, I love your term cancer warrior, because I think a lot of people, use the phrase cancer survivor, and it feels to me like you're sort of giving cancer more power. Um, what helped you in your being a warrior against cancer? Was it your mindset from sports? Was it your mindset from your days with Wendy's? Was it being on the SWAT division?
Yes, I think
Ex-
I think it was all of that, and I think one of the things that team sports taught me, and for me it was team sports. I think it can be whatever team you're part of, and we're all part of a team in some form or another. Was the importance of being part of something that's bigger than yourself. You realize on a team that if you don't do your job, not only do you let yourself down, but you let your teammates down, your coaches down, your fans down, etc. And if you think about it, the biggest team game that we all play is this game of life. So I've certainly had, the whole mindset. I had 3 knee surgeries in high school, had to come back from that. I went to a military college. That was a difficult experience in my life. I helped my mom care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. And now I'm battling my own form of cancer. So I've had adversity in my life. And I'll tell you 2 things I've learned. Number one, I don't think you really know yourself until you have been tested by some form of adversity in your life. And I know this second one's going to sound kind of crazy, but cancer has made me a better human being.
I love that. And we're going to explore that because one of the things, Terry, I've dabbled in this my whole life, but I always felt, number one, if you don't have adversity, I don't trust you because you don't know who you are. The other thing, I never thought about mindset because I just got up and did things. But what I didn't realize was that my mindset didn't need to be tweaked. It was already about building a mindset. Um, but lately, I've realized that not everybody does that. And so I'm going to ask you a total tangent question, but I personally believe that without mindset, the skill set and the gear set don't matter. Whereas if you've got the mindset, the skill set and gear set don't matter, but in a different way. Does that make any sense?
It makes absolute sense, and I absolutely believe that. I mean, if you look at our brains, they're hardwired to avoid pain and discomfort, and that's just from thousands and thousands of years of evolution. So to the brain, the status quo, the way things are right now, hey, comfortable and familiar, and just leave it alone. But Jeff, you know this, and most people listening to us know this. The only way you're going to grow, the only way you're going to improve, the only way you're going to get better is if you step outside those comfort zones and you do things that make you uncomfortable. When I was growing up playing basketball in Chicago, there was a basketball coach at Indiana University by the name of Bobby Knight, who recently passed away. And Knight was at the time, I think, the winningest basketball coach of all times. John Wooden may have been that person. But Knight had a great saying. He said, mental is to physical as four is to one. So here's this great coach teaching elite athletes to use their bodies to be excellent basketball players on the court. But what he's really saying with that quote is that your mind or your mindset is 4 times more important to your overall success, whatever you're doing, than anything that your physical body is going to do.
I love that. And I think that's, for me, I just took it for granted that everybody was as wired as I was to focus on the mindset. Now you speak in areas of motivation, mindset, and self-development. When I saw, I'm just gonna be honest, when I saw your profile, I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, I gotta have this wonderful, amazing human on my show. And I have to say, Terry, you've exceeded even my high expectations. Just the energy that you bring to this. Um, what are you finding in terms of motivation? Because one of the things I'm a big fan of is having habits, because I realize that a lot of people get lazy with motivation, and motivation in my world is probably the weakest link with a lot of my clients. So I just said, you know what, I'm going to stop fighting human nature. I'm going to build in habits so that they're successful. How do you help someone? I'm going to use the words wrong, but you'll correct me. How do you help someone find their own motivation? Because I don't believe I can motivate someone else. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Motivation is internal. It's got to be something that comes from inside of you. But motivation's not enough. I look at it as a three-legged stool, and you just mentioned one of the other legs, which is habits, having good habits. And the third leg I look at as discipline. So if you're motivated, but you don't have good habits and you're not disciplined, you're never going to be successful. If you're highly motivated, but you have poor habits, you're also not going to be successful. You need to have all three. And just like if cut off a leg on a three-legged stool, it would be out of balance. That same thing, I believe, certainly in my life, it's been that way. If I'm highly motivated, but I don't know what to do to get me to that point, and I'm not having good habits, and I'm not disciplined to implement those habits, I'm not going to get there. So yes, you need all three. Motivation's not enough, and we hear about that. It's a big word. I even named my company Motivational Check after it, but it's not enough. You need all three of those things in order to be successful in life.
I love it. And I think that's one of the aha moments. I used to think it was my job to motivate people, and then I'm like, wait a minute. And for the record, if I was a coach, I'm more of the stick kind of motivation than the carrot kind of motivation. But I just want people to show up and play full on. Um, Now
Yeah.
you talk about these three stool legs, and I love that. Um, where do you do a lot of your speaking? Like, where can people come and watch you in action?
I do it a lot. I do a lot more visual or virtual now because I had my leg amputated back in 2020. So I'm in a wheelchair, and I still have tumors that I'm treated for every 3 weeks in my lungs. So I do a lot more virtual things than I do in person. But I mean, people, I mean, I've been to different resorts here in Colorado where people were having, I spoke to the South Carolina Bankers Association's annual convention here in Colorado, which I thought was kind of funny. It's like, it's South Carolina. You got a million resorts and you want to come, halfway across the country, which was great. But as you and I were talking about before, most of them were having trouble breathing while they were, here in Colorado, things like that. But I'll speak to anybody. I love speaking, especially to young people, because they're still trying to figure it out, whether they're in high school, whether they're in college. And one of the things that I always try to tell, especially young people, is that if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things that you're going to regret are not going to be those things you did. They're going to be those things you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back and do those things.
I love it. I think that we can have a lot of fun. Um, I'm just fascinated by your background, and you know, personally, I find people with diverse backgrounds very interesting, and yet somehow when I look at where you went in your career, I can see, in hindsight, it made perfect sense. I'm sure at times you were going, "Wait, what did I do?" You're making big U-turns. Um, what do you think? What do you recommend for self-development? Somebody watching this, they're going, "Yeah, Terry, I know I need that, but where do I start?"
Anywhere, anywhere. I mean, I was, our daughter gave my wife and I the master class subscription last year, and I
Ooh.
was listening to the master class that Sarah Blakely did. Now, Sarah Blakely, for your audience who don't know her, started the company Spanx, and she talks about how she did that with $5,000 in a prototype, and that was all she had. And her husband is a man by the name of Jesse Itzler, who wrote some great books, Living with a Seal, and he did a time in a monastery and wrote about that. But he used to be the part owner of the Atlanta Hawks, the National Basketball Association. And I heard him talking about his wife, and he said, if Sarah would have waited to have everything line up, till I had everything perfect, and then started her business, he said somebody would have beat her to the punch. I would just say jump in. Just jump in wherever you are. Just figure it out. And if you listen to the masterclass, she'll tell you, I was good at sales, and that's pretty much all I was good at. I didn't know what to, so I had to hire people who had expertise that was different from mine in order to make the company continue to move forward. So don't think that, I got to wait till everything's perfect and everything's lined up. That'll never happen. That will absolutely never happen in your life. Nothing will ever be perfect. And there's always one more. Oh, wait a minute. If I get this one, then I'll be ready to go. And then when you get that one thing, it's like, oh, wait a minute. There's one more thing I need to. So don't feel like I don't know where to start. Where are you right now? Start there. Start there. Jump in and make mistakes. And especially when you're young, make a ton of mistakes. There's a young man by the name of Jason Pfeiffer, and I can't remember the book that he wrote, but he is now the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine. And he tells the story that when he graduated from college, he went to work for a small town newspaper and then decided he wanted to be an editor. So he took a job with a company that taught him how to do editing type A. And as soon as he learned that, he jumped ship and went to another company and learned editing type B. And then when he learned that, he jumped ship again and went to learned editing part C. And he had all this background, all this knowledge, all this experience, which set him up to be the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine. So understand what you want to do in your life, understand what your purpose is, understand what your gifts and talents are, and then try to do something. There's no perfect job. And I don't care how good you are, important you are, financially well off you are. There's no perfect job. There's always a downside to a job. So just jump in and see what happens. Sorry, Jeff, that was a much longer answer to your question than I probably should have given.
No need to apologize. My people, we're a bunch of weirdos. We love when people get really passionate. I kind of want to do a testify. You're preaching to the choir, my friend. So, um, just for the record, Terry is amazing, and for those of you watching this, I'm going to strongly encourage you to connect with him. Um, and I love the fact. So I'm going to tell you something, Terry. I was watching this video the other day, and you can give me a modern reference, but I'm going to use one that makes sense to me. Um, this individual, he was advocating that you study the mindset of more successful people. In this particular case, he was talking about billionaires. And he said something that really stuck with me. Most people learn business by asking someone else they know, like, and trust, somebody in their community, saying, how did you become more successful than I am? And I loved his analogy. He basically said it was like learning to play basketball from a kid on the playground who just happens to own his own basketball, versus if you talk to the billionaires and you learn their secrets, it's a little like having Michael Jordan or Shaquille O'Neal as your private coach. So
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, your overall success in life, whatever you end up doing in life, is going to be determined, I believe, by the 5 people you hang around with the most. If you hang around with people that are smart, that are financially well off, that are go-getters, that are making things happen, then you'll be that type of person. Versus if you hang around with people that everything is negative, nothing's positive, there's a lot of drama in their life, then you'll end up being that kind of person as well. There's that old saying, if you're the smartest person in the room, find another room. And that's so true. You don't want to be the smartest person in the room because you're not going to learn anything from these people. You
yep.
need to learn stuff from people who have done it, have made it to the pinnacle of success. And I think what people end up doing is, I could never, I could never reach out. I could never talk to that person. Why not? Well, the worst they can say is no. I don't want to have anything to do with you, kid. Get away from me. You don't know what you're talking about. Okay, fine. That wasn't supposed to be. But find people that you admire, find people that are successful, find people that you want to do, find mentors, find people that are willing to spend some time with you and say, hey, look, here's some things that I've learned. Just like that Jason Pfeiffer. He went to a company and learned something. And then once he learned it, he went somewhere else and learned something new. Don't ever feel that you know everything. I think one of the most important things you can do in life is be a lifelong learner. Never feel that, okay, I got it all. I know it all. I don't need to learn anymore. I want to die learning, and I hope I do. So yeah, always be a lifelong learner. Find people that'll make you better.
I love it. And I think the master class, that's one of my favorite things. Again, I'm just going to be a real jerk here, but you can go on YouTube and you can Google, whatever you want to Google and learn how to do something. But I have to say, there's a disturbing number of people who that's their entire job, is creating content. And believe it or not, I've seen videos behind the scenes of content farms over in third world countries. They're learning and sharing the instant gratification level tips, at the gear level, because, that's what they know. When you look at, say, masterclass.com, and I think that is one of my favorites, and I think Tony Robbins's mastermind.com, I'd rather learn from the people who've been there, done that. I mean, if I'm going to learn SWAT hostage negotiations, I'm not going to go read a book at the library on negotiating. I'm going to say, hey, Terry, what do I need to know about this job? Because the thing is, most books talk about the what, not the why, or maybe they get into the how a little bit. But if you teach everything you know in a book, then why does the world still need you as a speaker? What's been your most memorable speaking gig?
I spoke to, there's a hospital here in Denver called Craig, and it is made up of, their patients are basically head injury and spinal cord patients. And so many of them are young, so many of them, dove into the shallow end of the pool and broke their neck and, are paralyzed from the neck down and things like that. And I spoke to them virtually, and I wasn't sure how I resonated. I wasn't, I'm like, okay, yeah, I have cancer and I'm in a wheelchair, but I can move my one leg, I can move my body. Am I am I speaking over their heads, or like, why is this guy talking to us? I mean, he doesn't get us, and stuff like that. And I think that just to go back to a point you were making before, I think people that tell you they have all the answers, I'm real skeptical of those people. I'll tell you, I've been through some stuff and I've learned some stuff, but I don't have all the answers. I don't have it figured out yet. I'm still learning as I go. So that was probably the most rewarding thing. And I got a call a few days later from one of the people that was in that support group and said, hey, we really liked what you talked about, and we would like to set up a weekly or a monthly call with you outside of the hospital, because I was a little, I couldn't record it. It was, I mean, there were some constraints because it was part of the hospital. It's like, we would like to just talk with you and ask you questions. It's like, gosh, I did resonate with them. It did make a difference in their life. And so we ended up doing that. So that was absolutely the most rewarding thing, where you can make a difference in somebody else's life just by sharing what you know and sharing your experience, with the caveat that maybe this works for you, maybe it doesn't. But if it does, please, by all means, take it and incorporate it in your life so that you can have a better life.
I love it. And I love that search to help others. Now I'm going to ask you a deep personal question, and for my readers, listeners, they're used to this. You shared something in your bio about your 4 truths. So would you mind telling us what your 4 truths are and how they have assisted you? I'm going to say in your life journey, but also in your cancer journey.
Sure. So the 4 truths, I have them here on a Post-it note in my office. And so I see them multiple times during the day. They constantly get reinforced in my mind. So they're just one sentence each. Here's the first one. And we talked about this a little bit. Control your mind, or your mind is going to control you. The second one, we talked a little bit about this as well. Embrace the pain and the difficulty that we all experience in life, and use that pain and difficulty to make you a stronger and more resilient individual. The third one I look at kind of as a legacy type of truth, and it's this: what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And then the fourth one I think is pretty self-explanatory: as long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. And I talk about those 4 truths as kind of the bedrock of my soul. I feel they're just a good place to try to start to build a quality life off of.
I love that. And I think, that's the aha moment is, if we don't control our mind, we go into autopilot. And I think that's where a lot of people live day to day. And it's like, I can't fathom why we'd want to live in that world.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. When I was in college, as I mentioned, I went to a military college, and one year we had the president of the college was a man by the name of James Stockdale. He had retired as an admiral from the Navy. He was a naval aviator during the Vietnam War back in the 60s and 70s. He was actually shot down and spent 8 years in a prisoner of war camp, the Hanoi Hilton, the apparently worst camp that they had, and ended up winning our nation's highest military award, the Medal of Honor, for what he did in that camp to help the other prisoners resist the Viet Cong. And I remember being at an event with him. I did not spend a lot of time with him. He was the president of the college. I was a cadet. But somebody asked him, who survived that ugliness, that brutality, that torture? And he said, well, let me tell you who didn't survive. He said, the people who didn't survive were the big, tall, strong, tough guys that thought that they could handle any kind of abuse or torture. And this was, I thought, fascinating when he said this. He said the other group that didn't survive were the optimists. He said these were the people that thought, well, we'll be rescued or let go by Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter. And he said Thanksgiving and Christmas and Easter would come and go, and they wouldn't be released. And he said those people died of a broken heart. He said the people that survived were the ones that understood what they could control, which according to him was basically the breathing in our lungs and the thoughts in our mind. Everything else was at the discretion of the enemy, and controlled it. And Jeff, that's where I think people get in trouble, with their mind. they try to control things that are outside their purview, that they have no control over whatsoever. And that builds anxiety, and they get all worked up and things like that. Understand what you can control in your life and control that, and let the rest of the stuff go, because you have no control over it anyway.
Yeah. And I've heard that story about the optimists and the rugged individuals, and it's I tend, this is going to be an understatement, but I tend to be very high optimism, but I'm also very practical in that optimism requires action. It's not, and I've never been a prisoner of war, and I hope to never be one. Um, but I'd like to believe that I'd spend some of my time working on my mindset and trying, I think Viktor Frankl has been a big inspiration. Um, there's a lot of amazing things. Now, I could talk to you all day because you're absolutely fascinating. And so I'm going to have conversations with my wife about SWAT tonight and with my boys about Space Force. Um, where can people go? How can they enter your world and get to know more about who you are and what you do?
So I have a blog slash website called Motivational Check. Every day I put up a thought for the day, and with that thought usually comes a question about how maybe you can apply that thought into your life. I have recommendations for books to read, videos to watch. You can get access to my social media links. You can leave me a message. That's all at motivationalcheck.com.
Love it. Now, I'm sorry. The human being in front of me has been so interesting. I forgot to talk about your book.
That's
That's
okay.
bad manners. I'm sorry, Terry.
That's not a problem.
You could tell a podcast guest is fun. And by the way, most of my guests are fun. But when I forget to ask the most important question, where did the book come from? And what was your biggest lesson as you wrote it?
Yeah, I really didn't want to write a book. There's an old joke that says when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So God never talked to me. God never, said, write a book. But I think what God did was put people in my path that were saying over and over again, write a book, write a book. You should write a book. You should write a book. And I really was hesitant to do this. But the book is called Sustainable Excellence, the 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. And it was really a book that was born out of two conversations. One, as I mentioned, I was a girls' high school basketball coach. I had a player who I had coached who'd moved to the area in Colorado with her fiance, where my wife and I live, and the four of us had dinner one night. And I remember saying to her after dinner that I was excited that she was living close and I could watch her find and live her purpose. She got real quiet for a while. And then she looked at me and she said, "Well, coach, what do you think my purpose is?" I said, "I have absolutely no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth, using your unique gifts and talents, and living that reason." So that was one conversation. And then I had a young man reach out to me on social media from college, and he asked me what I thought were the most important things he should learn, not to just be successful in his job or in business, but to be successful in life. And Jeff, I didn't want to give him the, get up early, work hard, help up. I didn't want to give him sort of the cliches that we all know. I wanted to see if I could go deeper with him. So I spent some time taking some notes and eventually kind of had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I stepped back and I was like, well, I got a life story that fits underneath that principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates this principle. So literally during the months after I had my leg amputated, while I was healing, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and they're real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And that's how sustainable excellence came to be.
I love it. And that's my favorite books are the ones that have been earned, not written, because I think, you know, a good book takes time. And for me, it was about learning about me and things like that. So I love sharing that. Um, Now, I think people are, and I'm going to point people to the website because I think that's a great place to start. And I'm going to encourage the listeners here. Let's ask you a very practical question. What kind of organizations, I know you speak on Zoom. what kind of organizations would you like to be speaking to in 2024?
I would like to speak to, kind of up and comers, people that are trying to figure it out, which is why I enjoy so much talking to younger people. I mean, they're so interested. They're so, hey, you're an old guy. What have you learned? Tell me what you've learned. I want to implement that in my life. And that's what I want to do. I just want to share, whether it's people on university campuses, whether it's younger people that are just starting out in business or the trades or whatever is in their heart, and certainly corporations as well. I like doing that as well because I just like the interaction. And it's funny. I do enough on Zoom and things like that I was like, God, am I really getting the energy? Is that really coming through? And so I did a little research, and it's like, well, how do you get more energy if you're doing a virtual call? And they said you should do the call standing up. I'm like, darn, I only have one leg. That's probably not going to happen, but it was just, how do you want to be better in your life? And like I said, I don't have all the answers, Jeff, but I've learned a lot of things through my different, whether it's illnesses or being a SWAT negotiator or whatever. I've learned a lot of things that I think can help people. And that's just my purpose now, to put those out there and hope that I can make a difference in somebody's life. It's not about making money. It's not about, being on stages. It's not about writing more books or anything like that. It's about connecting. And people have asked me, how do you want to be remembered? I'm like, I don't. We're not going to be remembered. I mean, 100 years from now, nobody's going to know I was even here. But what I want to do while I'm here is connect. I want to connect with other people. If I can do that in my life, then as far as I'm concerned, my life has been successful.
I love it. And honestly, Terry, I love your energy. Most people complain more about waiting in line at Starbucks for 11 minutes. You've had an 11-year battle with cancer. You've had some amputations. I love the energy that you bring because, again, we're only victims if we decide to be. Is that fair?
It is. I love the quote from Usain Bolt, the fastest man in the world, who said, "I trained 8 years to run 9 seconds, and people give up on their dreams after 2 months." He said, "Understand that your dreams take time, and it should not be about the end goal. I mean, if you want to be successful in life, you got to love the work. You got to love the grind. Can't wait to get up and get into it and figure out what you're going to do. It can't be, I want to be famous, or I want to be rich, or I want to be successful, because you won't put in the work. You don't love it enough to do it when it's uncomfortable, when you're not feeling good, when people are saying, oh, you shouldn't do that. You're terrible at it. You got to love the grind. Find something in life that you love grinding with and get to it. I promise you'll have a great life.
And by the way, I would just second this. I don't really care for professional athletes because they're getting paid to play a game, and a lot of them are big babies having tantrums. But I love watching the college and the Olympic athletes. I can't remember which race or which Olympics I saw, but when you see Bolt finish, I mean, that guy is grinning ear to ear, like he is living his passion. And it's funny because Canadians claim Donovan Bailey, even though I'm pretty sure he was born in the Caribbean. Um, Watching those two race is just inspiring because, again, think about your success is measured by a stopwatch
Yeah.
in hundreds, if not thousands of a second. And yet every day they get back up, they go and they practice and they bleed for what they believe in. They sweat for it. Yet us, it's like, oh, the lineup was too long. I'm gonna go home.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, opportunity knocked on my door, but I didn't feel like getting off the couch to, I couldn't leave my Netflix binge behind. And
But I think that you make a huge point. People ask me, how do you callous your mind? How do you overcome, those things? And it's real simple, but people don't want to do it because of the way our brains are hardwired to avoid pain and discomfort. How do you get better? You do things you don't want to do. You get up in the morning, I don't want to make my bed. Make your bed. I'll grab a donut on the way to the office. No, you know you need to eat a good breakfast. Eat a good breakfast. No, I don't want to get off the couch and go to the gym. I like watching my Netflix binge watch, whatever it is this week. No, get off do things that you don't want to do. Do things that make you uncomfortable. Because if you do that, when the big disasters in life hit us, and they hit all of us, we lose somebody who's close to us, we get let go from our job, find out we have a chronic or a terminal illness, you'll be so much more resilient to handle that pain. And so I do this every day. I do one thing every day that scares you, that makes you uncomfortable, that makes you nervous, that's potentially embarrassing. Because if you do those things, you'll be so much more resilient, like I said, when the big disasters in life hit us.
And I think that's, we can, I think the saying is plan for the, no, hope for the best and plan for the worst. That's kind of my motto, because again, if I'm up at 5 a.m. and all my competitors are up at 8 a.m., I've got a 3-hour advantage every single day.
Yeah, there's a great I know you don't professional athletes, but there's a great story about Kobe Bryant, who played for the Los Angeles Lakers, who would do just that. I can get up at 5, have a workout, eat, recover, and then get back in the gym by 9 o'clock, whereas everybody else is waking up at 8 and they're in their gym for the first time. So I can get at least one more workout in per day than everybody else. You multiply that by 7 days a week, 12 months a year. How many more workouts have you gotten? How much better are you than those people just because you got up a few hours earlier?
Yeah. And I think, for the record, I love professional athletes who show up with a smile on their face and they appreciate their fans. Um, Kawhi Leonard, when he was
Yeah.
captain of the Toronto Raptors, I mean, he brought heart to that team. And, you know, those people I admire. It's the ones who hide behind their press agents to cover up their latest DUI or indiscretion. I got no time for those people, because they have a gift and they're not taking advantage of it. They're not using it for the greater good. And, it's just, but I love watching the Olympics when I can't remember his name, but there was a Canadian who won in the Winter Olympics. He won the first gold medal of his life. And that kid was hopping up and down like he just won the lottery and a one-way ticket to heaven. Like, he was just excited. And I wish people would bring that to their business. That's kind of where I'm getting at. It's like, if you're just showing up and punching the clock, go do something else. Is that fair?
But there's so many people that do that. There's an entrepreneur by the name of Ed Mylett, who talks about the 4 types of people in the world, and I love how he describes it. He said the first group are the unmotivated, and he says that's the vast majority of people that you will run into in your life. He said the second group are the motivated. He said it's kind of a low level way of living. It's kind of a carrot and stick. If I do this, I will get that. He says it's kind of low level way of living, but it works for a lot of people to be happy in their lives. And then the third group he talks about are the inspirational people. The word inspiration coming from 2 words, in spirit. If you're inspirational, you move people with your energy. And then the last group he talks about are the aspirational people, where people aspire to be like you. And sometimes if I'm kind of in a goofy mood when I'm talking to a group, I'll be like, all right, show of hands. How many people are unmotivated? Nobody raises their hand. Nobody says they're unmotivated. But if you believe Mylett's description, that's the vast majority of people. So, of the people, 100 people in a room, most of you should be raising your hand. I'm just not motivated. I'm just punching that time card. I don't really care. But those are people that have settled. Those are people that have gotten to a point in life where they're just like, you know what, I'm good. I'm not gonna push myself. I'm not gonna go beyond my comfort zone. And those people, I don't like being around those people because they have no energy. They don't bring any enthusiasm to something that they love, because they don't love it. They're just kind of putting in their time.
Yep, I love it. And I find it ironic they're not even motivated enough to raise their hand to say they're not motivated. And self-fulfilling prophecy at that point. But it's like, if you're motivated, raise your hand. I bet you get a very different answer.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But even then, it's that self-awareness, and I think that's where I stand. Now, Terry, you are the expert at being Terry, and I've probably missed asking you 1,000 things, and I think you'll be back on the show. That's a safe bet. Is there something you wish I would have asked you that I haven't?
I guess let me just tell you a story because I enjoy this. I enjoy this story because it's really kind of something that's near and dear to my heart these days. So I had as I mentioned, I go to the hospital every 3 weeks to be treated for the tumors that I have in my lungs. And I had a nurse recently ask me what it was like. I had my foot amputated in 2018, my leg amputated in 2020. And I told her it hasn't been easy. You know, when you're 6'8", learning to walk again, falling is not an option. You kind of get hurt from this height and things like that.
Hmm.
But what I told her was cancer can take all my physical faculties, but it can't touch my heart, it can't touch my mind, and it can't touch my soul. And that's who I am. That's who you are, Jeff. That's who everybody's listening to us is. And we spend so much time working on this vessel, this body. You know, we go to the gym, we eat right, we get enough rest, we reduce stress. And I'm certainly not telling you not to do that. I think you should do that. But what I am suggesting is maybe spend a little more time every day working on who you really are, your heart, your mind, and your soul. We know this body's going to die, it's going to decay, and it's going to go away. But your heart, your mind, and your soul, I believe those things are eternal. I believe they will live on. And I just don't think we spend enough time working on them as we should.
I love it. And I'll add to that. I realize that, again, this body will crumble, it will return to ashes, to dust. But my legacy, my boys, and you with your daughter, um, that's the only true immortality that matters to me, is leaving the world a little bit better for those that I love. And I think you bring your heart and your spirit to it. I think that makes a big difference. Terry, it was fabulous chatting with you. I want to thank you for taking the time to hang out with me and my community.
Well, Jeff, thank you very much for having me on. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to our show. We hope that you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to either click the link below or scan the QR code to register and listen to other episodes of our podcast. Or if you think your business or you would be a great guest to be on our show, we're always looking for experts in one of the 9 elements of holistic wellness. We'd love to have you. You can either click the link below or you can scan the QR code and complete our speaker intake form. Thank you, and to your wellness.